Well, welcome to the next episode of Voice AI podcast, where we discuss the future of voice AI. Today, I'm thrilled to host Ruma Nair, who is a very good friend of mine and also product lead of AI at Twilio, where she focuses particularly on agent Copilot product. Ruma, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Nice to meet you, David.
Did you know about this podcast, by the way, or you heard from me? Are you
Uh,
guys like following my newsletter at Twilio or not?
well, you're famous at Twilio. For everybody else, David used to work at Twilio.
Actually,
Uh,
right? Yes. That's a
and
bias, of course.
I think one of my peers did show up on this podcast. So I
Right.
do know the good things that Crisp is doing too. So, I also know you had a new release recently about accents and really thrilled about all the releases that you're doing.
Yes, yes. We have an accelerated launches coming in Q2 as well, so super excited about that. But hey, let's focus on you and your work at Twilio, right? So you are working on the agent Copilot product that Twilio has, and we never had actually episode or deep dive on Copilot, or also known as real-time assist, right? Is my understanding correct? Is the same category? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would love to learn your perspective. Like, how come Twilio sort of decided to have it as a separate product offering? I know that Twilio has Flex, which is a contact center product, and CCaaS, right? What made you like separate it as a separate like blog, and also what feature it has? What's the most important feature? Things like those, right? Please.
Yeah, so let me tell you the story of Agent Copilot. As I always joke, as a product, it was born a couple of years ago, especially when we realized that AI is taking off. And as everybody knows, AI in contact center can be extremely valuable. So that's the reason why we started thinking a lot about how can we leverage AI to help our customers, especially those who are leveraging contact centers. And originally, it was born in Flex. It's available to Flex customers. And for everybody else who does not know what Flex is essentially a contact center or a customer care application for anyone who wants to set it up for their businesses. One thing good with that Twilio does pretty well, is it supports a lot of different channels. We kind of call it omni-channel. Makes it very easy for you to share context and set it up and things like that. So the what is let's take a step back and talk a little bit more on what is Copilot, right? And the definition of Copilot, the way we are thinking about it, is that it's a set of tools that can help your contact center agent or customer care representative be a lot more efficient and empathetic and consistent. So there were a few problems that we've seen after talking to a lot of customers, right? One is that a lot of contact center agents have take a lot more time to onboard. They need to learn a lot of processes. They need to learn a lot about the product, and it approximately takes at least 7 to 8 months, or if not more, to onboard. Another interesting thing, and this is all that has been mentioned by customers, is that a lot of them change jobs too. So sometimes they don't even last 7 to 8 months. So then, can we leverage AI to ensure that everyone is consistent? So we have somebody who's a very good contact center agent. Can we ensure that we can reduce that onboarding time for someone who is new? So that was like the first problem that we tackled. And remember, this was something that we started around 2 years ago, before the whole agentic environment came into being, before we have all the voice agents in the last 6 to 8 months. That technology has also blown up, right? So that's one thing that's very fascinating, is that things are constantly evolving with our customers. So coming back to Agent Copilot, what we then did is we leveraged data, tried to talk to a lot of our customers and see where are agents spending their most time. So one was, as I mentioned, customer onboarding, making it consistent. The second problem that we said is, let's pick a problem that can be easy for AI to solve, right? Something that's administrative, something that you can see the value very quickly. And
Mm.
as part of that, what we did was we saw that a lot of agents are spending time in writing notes, trying to figure out why did a customer call, right? And that is something that they call as after call work in the technical terms. So that was the second thing that we tried to address is let us try and automate after call work. So as part of that, we launched Copilot that does exactly that. Is it automates after call work, and what that does is it automatically summarizes, which we've seen a lot of vendors do. But we've also seen things such as dispositioning, where it determines what happened in the call,
Yep.
why a customer called, things like that. And ultimately, what's really important is that not only are you doing that, but these customers leverage that information, leverage that data, and then figure out that next strategy. So your contact center is no longer a cost center, right? It's also trying to drive that strategy for your customer.
Yep.
So that was when Copilot turned one, right? And now Copilot is a toddler. And what we've seen in the last 6 months is that there has been a change, there has been a request, and that's also because technology has really caught up on real time use cases, right? Is can we, at real time, when someone is talking to you, to a contact center agent, can we provide recommendations to this agent? And that comes back to that story about I want my contact center agent to be consistent, right? So that is the second thing that we're providing is that real-time agent assist capabilities. And how are we doing that is one is, a lot of customers have thousands of articles, knowledge base articles. So can we share that information? Another thing is we use, as everybody knows, knowledge bases, RAG, in order to ground AI and provide that right information. So we are doing that. Alongside with that, what we are also doing is leveraging the contextual information. So when I'm having a conversation with you, David, right now, I could potentially have a co-pilot with me telling me to, hey, I think you are talking too fast. You need to slow down, or things like that. Or maybe we should have tried your accent tool right now in the podcast because I have a slightly mixed American Indian accent. I would say you have an Armenian accent, so we could have,
Yeah, I
tried
wish.
that.
Yeah, I don't know how when we're gonna prioritize Armenian English accent. I mean, there aren't many Armenians out there, but this is like but anyway. So like I think that's a great overview, Ruma. So so basically, onboarding is number one problem, I guess. And do you have any like understanding or stats on how much this impacts onboarding, right? If it's like if it was 7 to 8 months, which is a staggering number actually.
Yeah, it is.
Do you know how, yeah, how much does it decrease that time?
Yeah, so we've been a few things, right? And for 7 to 8 months is on an average, because we've also seen they are like big companies that do it. And another information on this one is BPOs, because what has happened is, as we all know, last few years have been a little tricky for businesses, and they're trying to figure out how to do more with less. And we've also seen this trend of customers leveraging BPOs alongside with trying to have bots. So the way I have seen is that for some customers, right, and this basically depends upon the type of knowledge you share and the type of setups. And this is where we should talk a little bit more. Is it's not something that you quickly deploy, but you need to like go at it and make it good that works for your business, right? So the way we have seen this is that it kind of reduces the onboarding time by at least like 40 to 50%, which is pretty good, but we
It's
can
huge.
really like improve upon this, right?
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, like given the how given the rate of like changing jobs in the call centers for agents, right? This is going to be a huge uh, sort of cost saving especially for BPOs, right? Um, okay, and pretty much you said so the faster onboarding and training. I guess like improved first call resolution would be
Yes.
amongst these, right? Which is a very important metric. And this would be for the real time assist, like for the real like next best action type of functionality, right? And I
Yeah,
guess like for next,
I think average handle time. The first
yeah,
metric I've heard most customers mention is I want a balance of average handle time, alongside with an NPS or a CSAT metric. So it's like a balance of operational metrics, but at the
Mm,
same time, something that you want to ensure that your customer sentiment
sure.
is better, right? It should
Yeah.
not deteriorate, which we've seen a lot of times. And that's the tricky part is how many people are actually happy when they call a contact center, right? Most likely they're not. That's why they're calling you or they're reaching out to you. So that's another tricky part is how do you
Mm,
assess that? And one interesting thing that we did with that is we're actually doing a relative analysis. So let's say that a customer calls in. We are analyzing the sentiment towards the end of the call, right? So if, for example, their case was understood, resolved, and they're like, hey, we're very happy about this, or thank you, or whatever that may mean, we leverage the outcome versus figuring out what's the sentiment in a complete call, because what matters is more of an outcome because they're always in a not a very good mood when they call in, right? So
yeah.
that was a very interesting challenge we faced when we first launched this.
Okay. Very cool. And also like the reduced cognitive load, I guess, on the agents, right? Like knowing that there is a system that is going to help you. I mean, like I always thought that it's so hard to build a UX around like these real time conversations. Like we are having a conversation now, like, and then like building something that will help me, guide this conversation is so hard because my focus is really on you and on the conversation, and like something comes in there, and like it must be so subtle and so like in time that I'm not sure like I've ever seen anyone like nailing that experience.
Honestly, it's
Like,
a work in progress for everybody. We've been constantly doing baselining. So what we've been doing is we have these user testing where we have some of the future facing designs, and we're having people click through it, talk about it, and they were constantly making comparisons on this, right? Because it's very hard. And I think what's even harder is for voice, because one of the biggest challenges that we ran into is people don't want this thing that's constantly popping up during the voice, because sometimes you may not need it, right? So
oh, it's
let's say I'm
annoying. They're gonna close it, right? Yeah.
exactly. So you have to like do that fine balance. To be honest, we're not yet there, right? We're constantly evolving and making it better, but that is something that we have to keep learning on.
Yeah. Cool. And so, Ruma, so what was the like what was the justification for like separating as a product? I mean, it's part of Flex. It's very clearly the use case is understood there. Pretty much every CCaaS platform has something like this these days, right? But then it's separate. Is it because Twilio like thinks everything is a Lego block and it can be integrated everywhere else? Is that the thinking, or there is more to this?
Yeah, I think there are a few different factors. So the first factor is what you mentioned. Once a trillion, always a trillion, David, is that we are a platform and we are seeing customers wanting to build this themselves, right? Versus having an out of box solution. So Agent Copilot for Flex is more of an out of box solution. And what that means is that as a customer, you don't necessarily need developers to use it, like to build on top of it. You can just
Yeah.
directly go, deploy, and you're done, right? And so that type of a customer base is very different. So the user for Agent Copilot is someone in the operations team who doesn't necessarily need to code, right? Who just needs to know a little bit more about what are the topics I want to capture from my business. So what we've seen with that is we are also moving more towards actual Twilio customers who are not necessarily the Flex customers, but more builders. I'm not sure whether you've heard about this, but in the last few weeks, or rather last few months, our CPO Inbal has mentioned that we'll be focusing more and more on builders because that's our DNA, that's our core customer. And that's the reason why we're thinking about not pivoting, but having a platform for these builders. And they don't necessarily need to use Flex for that, right? Because Flex is for out of box customers. So that was one of the reasons why it made sense. The second thing is, like Twilio has the API is our core DNA, and there are so many different AI capabilities that we are building within Twilio. And one of the problems that I have seen with customers is they need somebody to help them connect those dots, right? So you have this use case where, and every customer has this, right? First of all, somebody goes and connects to a virtual agent. It could be chat, it could be voice, and whatever that may be. After that, you're not happy with it. Your customer says, I want to talk to a human agent. So now you escalate that call and you send that call somewhere to a human agent. And finally, after that call has happened, you need to run some analysis that helps your operations teams to figure out what is the next step for this? Is my business running right? Are we making revenue? There are a lot of other things that we need to figure out. So that is an essential journey that all businesses have to take. So, and we have all those parts with us in Twilio. So, what we're trying to do with having this as a platform and making it a lot more easily is integrable a right word, but maybe easily integrated with the rest of blocks. It makes it easy for customers to move these blocks around, right? One thing that's a challenge, David, right now with all the vendors that are there is that everyone does one thing really well, right? Some of them are really good with virtual agents. We have a lot of, you and I have talked a lot about those
Yep.
amazing voice agents, right? They're brilliant, but they do that really well. There are some who do agent copilot like CCAS products really well. But we need somebody that connects these dots so that it helps these customers to move their use cases from either from a human augmentation mode to a virtual agent or vice versa.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I really love that Twilio will focus more on builders. I think there is a lot to create at Twilio, right? And to bring the builders to the platform,
Yeah,
especially with all these new AI. And I mean, there is so much communication that's going to happen in the future, including robotics.
exactly.
Um, so the
Yeah.
communication industry is just going to keep growing way faster than it was. So that's like the co-pilot part, but also I'm pretty sure like you're talking to customers all the time, right, as someone from the product team. And I would love to hear your opinion on or insights on like what are the journeys that the buyers go through these days, right? Like even that there is a abundance of such technologies, as you said, some companies are good at something, and then others like for transparency, Crisp has a Copilot product as well. I don't think it's not there yet compared to what you have, but we are investing in this. So, but so from buyer's perspective, how do they navigate their decisions, right? Also, like there is so much uncertainty for them, right? I mean, the prices go like AI price is going down from one perspective, and then there are like the virtual agents from another perspective. It must be like super confusing for them. What do you have any insights regarding this?
Yeah, it's very fascinating because these COOs or the CXOs, there are some companies that have customer experience officers. And what they have is a set of constraints is for this year, I have so much money or so many resources. And now I have to make a bet on AI. One thing we know is everybody is trying to make a bet on AI. Now, what's
Mhm.
unclear is what use cases to prioritize. And multiple times I've had this journey with customers where every month their use cases or their pilots are changing, right? Like I want to run so many different pilots because there are so many vendors around and there's so much marketing around that everybody wants to jump on that next shiny thing. And what happens because of that is that you have a lot of abandoned and unsuccessful pilots. So
Mm,
what there are a few things that I would recommend, right? If you go down that path, is one thing that's probably that will always change is the vendors. There are going to be more and more vendors. Some of the vendors are probably new right now, but would be more established, as you mentioned, David, right? In next year, you may be in a much more established way for Agent Copilot. So now you have two products that have similar functionality. So how do you figure this out, right? Which one to use? And then there's a third option where there are some customers who are asking, why don't I build this? Right. So
mm,
there's like all these confusion. It's a confusion, but it's a good confusion. It's a good problem to have because they have like all these different options. Now, here are a few suggestions that I would recommend. Is the first thing is know your customer, right? We all can tell you like what our product does well, but you need to know your customer. Every business is different. Like that, but your customers are probably slightly different from Twilio's customers, right? So you
Yep.
need to know that distinctive personality and their pain points very, very clearly. That's first. Second is always keep that North Star metric on like what do you want to exactly do? What is the goal that you want to achieve? And then you can swap out the products based on that goal, but keep that direction going. Because one thing I can say is that none of us can predict what's going to happen in the next 5 years, right? But one thing you know is you kind of know the direction you want to go to, especially for your business, right? You want to retain certain customers? Do you want to expand to a certain industry? And those kind of things are something that you should always keep in mind before deciding what you need to do. The third thing is, and maybe this is a cliche, but I'm always saying that AI is a tool, right? It's a solution. So figure out your problem and then figure out whether AI can be a solution. There have been times where I don't know whether it's a good thing, but I go to a customer meeting and they'll be talking about all these use cases and then trying to figure out which one should I automate versus which one should I have it for my human agents. And then you can go down the route of, okay, which are the easy ones that you really don't need a human, and then you go down the route of, okay, this doesn't even need AI, right? You could do something as simple as updating your application and having a different web page or something to help your customers. So sometimes you don't even need AI. So that's the way I always tell customers is, AI is great, but you should know where to use it when. And that's the best way to do it. And when
Yeah.
I'm hoping that the way Twilio is building its platform, it should be very easy for you to move your use cases around.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like what separates Twilio is its scale, right? Scale and reliability. I mean, I don't think there is any other platform that has that. And I like when I talk to other folks, I think like the feedback is that hey, like Twilio is just waiting for uh, for things to settle a bit, because there is just like if you try to build something, like one of the risks that you will have as a builder, right, is that you simply choose the wrong architecture, because no one knows what's going to happen, what's the right architecture is going to be in 6 months, right? And so the risk is that you will end up creating something but on the wrong architecture, and then you will need to re-architect everything,
And
and compare it to someone who will just wait a bit, and then just chose the architecture that the industry agrees is the right architecture, and then like they just have they don't have the depth, and they can just innovate on that. So
yeah,
that's
100%.
interesting.
And there's also models, right? Like I think another thing that I'm seeing with customers is you don't want to go down the route of picking one model. Because what happens is I would even actually say not one model, what I meant was model vendor. Like I haven't
Yeah.
seen customers say that, look, I just don't want to use an open AI, right? I would love to be able to swap between, Anthropic or Mistral or what have you, right? So that's another trend that customers are saying. Another very interesting thing that I keep telling customers is let's ensure that you bring your legal and your procurement and your security teams from day one, right?
Mm.
Right when you start doing your POCs, because then they know what you're thinking, and they also are very well aware of the vendor. And the vendor also has that opportunity to discuss all these questions that security team may have when it comes to data and privacy. Because many a times what happens is you love a product, you say, hey, this is an amazing POC, but finally when you get to procurement or security, they're like, actually, no, we don't want this model, right? And then you're stuck. So that's another way of like unblocking yourself. I've seen, David, that probably last year and this year too has been the year of POCs, right? There's a lot of good, successful POCs, but the challenge has been like getting into production. And this is one of a lever that you can leverage to make sure that you're picking the right pilot and then finally productionizing it to actually reap the benefit.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, a lot of good insights. Ruma, thanks so much for coming and sharing this with us and with the audience. Yeah, I'm always excited about Twilio, and looking forward to use more Twilio at Crisp as well.
That sounds good. You know where to find us.
Yep, yep. Yeah, thanks for coming to the podcast.